I'm now going to introduce our chair, Catriona Wilson, who's going to start our panel.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Hello, everybody, and welcome this evening to this session about museum and heritage jobs off the beaten path. So this evening, we're exploring museum and heritage roles that don't fit in the standard areas you'd expect. Our panel will highlight some of the roles you might never have realized you could even do, talking about unique career paths, diverse skills and experience, and the inevitable highs and lows of this somewhat hidden work. And happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, good point. That's lovely. I forgot about that. That's nice. So I'm Catriona Wilson. I'm head of the Petrie collection at UCL, and I'm a committee member of Fair Museum Jobs. Our panel this evening is Paola Ricciardi, who's senior research scientist at the Fitzwilliam Museum at the University of Cambridge, Hope Miyoba, Wikimedian in residence, Science Museum Group, Elly, consultant archivist, and Nuha Abdo, Multaka Oxford Community Ambassador. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We really appreciate it. So the first thing I wanted to do, because all of your roles are so incredibly varied and broad, I would like you to invite you all in turn to describe your work and your route into this role for a little bit so that the audience can hear a bit more about what you do. And I would like to start with Nuha, if that's all right, because you're the first on the top of my screen. Welcome.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Nuha Abdo. I'm originally from Syria. My background is social worker. I work with the UN in Syria for 3 years before I came here. And I start here, formed group called Syrian Sisters, very successful women's group in Oxford. And also I did some research with Oxford University in Refugee Studies Center. But my job in Oxford is community ambassador in project called Multaka. Multaka is a meeting point in Arabic, and this project work across Science History Museum and Beach Rivers Museum. And my role is bring a new network and people to museum and working all together to make a change in Oxford University. Thank you.
What an amazing job. Thank you for describing that. That's, yeah, sounds really important, and it's not something I've heard very much about before. So thank you very much. Paula, would you like to go next? And I will bring up your slide, I hope. So we'll see.
Thank you, Catriona. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. And let's see if we can get the slide. Thank you for putting that up. I have a very visual job. So I'm a research scientist. So I'm a physicist by training. I trained as a physicist as an undergraduate in Italy. And then I specialized in heritage science through a master's and a PhD. And I did do all of my studies in Italy, which is where I'm from, but then worked both as a PhD student and then as a postdoc in museums and universities in France and then in the United States for a few years. And I've been in Cambridge since 2011, so it's been 9 years. And my job basically entails running a science lab within an arts museum. So you can see our lab at the top left. It looks like almost any sort of physical or chemical lab, except it's within the museum, and except that the objects I work with are museum objects, such as the lovely Bodhisattva sculpture that you see at the top center. And what I'm doing there is I'm using some light, some visible and infrared light to figure out what pigments were used to paint that sculpture. And I'm doing that without even touching the surface of the sculpture. I'm holding a fiber very close to the surface, and I'm exploiting the reflection of light off the surface to figure out how it was made. And so my role is mostly about research. I am a researcher. I work in collaboration with curators and conservators across the museum, but also across the university and with museums across the world. We have collaborations in Europe and in the US mostly. And so I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of sort of pigment identification. But that it doesn't stop there. So this kind of work, this kind of research enhances our understanding of the collections. And so we use that, for example, to inform exhibitions. So that's what you see at the top right. That exhibition was called Color, the Art and Science of Illuminated Manuscripts. And it was showcasing both manuscripts and the materials and the techniques used by the artists who painted them. We also started to do quite a lot of outreach, especially with schools. So that's what you see on the bottom left. We're putting together a workshop in a box because we can't actually invite schools in the museum right now and for a few months to come, to look at the chemistry and color of art, so that primary school students in particular can learn across the curriculum and, you know, enjoy both sort of art and design, but also science learning all together, and really learn sort of transdisciplinary skills and, you know, not silo their learning. And finally, sometimes you also get to do something exciting and end up on newspapers and in the media. And at the moment, you know, as of last week, actually, I'm working on a lovely 16th century Bible that belonged to either Henry VIII or Thomas Cromwell. And the Bible now has a Twitter page, actually a Twitter feed, which you can follow. We're posting every day on our new discoveries on the Bible. We're finding lots of interesting political photoshopping, I guess, from the Tudor age.
Thank you very much. Would you, if you can do you want to put the Twitter link in the chat, the Twitter
Sure.
handle, so that people can find it? Thank you. I also went to that exhibition and it was really beautiful. I'm from Cambridge originally, so I get to go back sometimes, less so this year, obviously, but yeah, really beautiful. Thank you. Hope, would you like to go next, please?
Hi everyone, so I'm Hope and I'm a Wikimedian in residence for the Science Museum Group. And basically a Wikimedian in residence is a Wikipedia editor who works closely with cultural and heritage institutions. So that could be galleries, libraries, archives and museum, to help digitize some of their collections, archives or objects and anything else that they kind of would like to put online but aren't maybe really versed in the world of Wikipedia. And I help handle everything from Wikicommons, which is an image-based Wikipedia site project, to Wikidata and kind of all the other Wikipedia, everything else in the kind of Wikipedia sphere. And my job varies day to day. So I mainly work with the digital department, as I said, helping digitize parts of the collections or exhibitions. Sometimes I'll work with archives team to do quite the same with them. I may work with PhD and research students to kind of help put expert knowledge or fill in informational gaps that are missing onto Wikipedia, that they have the knowledge and research and kind of evidence on. That link back to the institution that I may be working with at that time. And I also help with kind of like audience outreach on a global scale, with Wikipedia being the 6th largest website and English Wikipedia being the kind of the main used one online. I kind of help with helping their collections reach a much more global audience with the cultures that objects or stories or exhibitions may be linked to, that they may not have direct access to, especially now being in a pandemic and in lockdown, when we can't really interact with a lot of like international visitors or students or people. That often Wikipedia is quite a good way to help get this information out to a much bigger audience worldwide. And this information can be sometimes translated into different languages by me or by other people in teams that I'm working with, or just by other Wikipedia editors that are on there that I might help facilitate with. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow, yeah. That sounds really huge as a role. That sounds really broad and really varied. I imagine you get a lot of different things all the time, different bits of information, and yeah, really interesting. Thank you. Elly, would you like to go last, please? Thanks. Oh, you're muted still. Sorry.
Sorry, I have got a couple of slides. Is it easy for me to share it? I mean, have I got sharing rights? It's not essential, but
I can make you, oh no, I can't make you a co-host. Lucy, would you please make Elly a co-host so that she can share? Is that all right? Hopefully Lucy's there.
I'm here and I've just done it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Right. Oh, right. Okay. I've just got I'm just going. This will take again not very long. I have just a very few slides, but I'm just going to very quickly talk you through some of the work that I have been doing for the last 3 years, working on a project at the Imperial War Museum. I'm a consultant archivist. I'm a digital archivist, and my role at the Imperial War Museum has been involved at undertaking web archiving as part of the project. So I'll just talk very briefly about that. So I've been working on the 1418 Now project, which is the UK arts programme for the First World War centenary, which was ran between 2014 and 2018. And the project commissioned many hundreds of pieces of work from artists, musicians, filmmakers, designers, performers, etc. Some of the more well-known included the Poppies, Wave and Weeping Window sculpture, which you may have seen touring around the country. It started off at the Tower of London. Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old film, which was released in October 2018 in cinemas, and Danny Boyle's Pages of the Sea to mark the armistice in November 2018. So I've been working on this project, and I've been working as part of the digital archiving team, and as part of that role we've undertaken cutting edge web archiving. I'll just talk very briefly about that and what we've been doing in terms of the web archiving team. So essentially this is all very, very new and cutting edge, and very few organisations are actually undertaking this using this technology at the moment. We've used a web recorder, which is essentially a suite of open source tools to capture interactive websites, or capture websites in an interactive way. And the web recorder will then replay the websites as accurately as possible. Web recorder is completely free to download. So in fact, any museum or heritage organisation can actually use this to archive their website. We also archive not only the project website, we also archived the 10 project microsites, the We're Here Because We're Here microsite, which was another project, the Twitter feed, the Instagram feed, and also the YouTube feed, and much of the web capture, which is incredibly time consuming for all this material, because it was a very, very large project. It was undertaken by external consultant Anissa Halls, who worked on the project alongside me. But that's essentially a very quick overview of the project, and essentially in museums and also in archives as well, and other heritage organisations, this idea of web archiving is becoming more and more essentially popular as an undertaking. And there are working within museums and heritage organisations, there are individuals who work as web archivists, and also like Anissa Halls, for example, who worked on a project, who are external archivists, web archivists, who will undertake the work remotely for organisations. So web archiving, the role of the web archivist is relatively new in the heritage sector. So that's the end of my slides.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elly. Thank you so much. It's all so very broad, although as Manira has mentioned in the chat, digital skills clearly are very key. And she's asked, what advice would the panel have in terms of developing these skills further in terms of courses or training? Is that something you'd like to pick up, perhaps, somebody? Now? Anyone?
Just whilst I'm on the topic, the National Archives and the Digital Preservation Coalition run a what's called its course is called Novice to Know-How. It's about 2 days, and you can undertake it remotely, but it's aimed essentially at it's perhaps more archival perhaps than kind of museum digital skills. It's more really about the back end. But at the moment, they're actually running it the course for free during COVID-19. So I know that a lot of individuals working in the heritage sector are actually undertaking that course and find it incredibly useful, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for finding a link to that there, Lucy. So Lucy's put a link to that in the chat for anybody who wants to find out a bit more. Thanks. So I wondered, so they're all very, very varied roles, obviously. I wondered how you found them, how you came to find these roles, and whether it's something that you expected to be doing or hoped to be doing, or what was your path to them? How did you find the roles? Would anyone like to start? Yes, Nuha, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, my experience work in Syria as social worker, and also here start working with different organizations helping people, and founding Syrian sister and work in research as bringing networking, is all helped me to develop my jobs with museum. My aiming from my job in museum to bring different people from different culture to museum to share and add their voice to object and make a museum more lively. And all my experience helped me because in all my job I've been working with different people from different culture and background, and it's all fit very well in my job with museum. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm happy to go next, if that's
Please.
all right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny, I think I do what I always wanted to do in a way. So as a little girl, I really, really wanted to be an archaeologist. I had this fascination for, Indiana Jones and all of that. And then I must have been about 12 or 13. And someone said, well, if you want to do that, you need to learn ancient Greek. And I thought, that's way too hard. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. And so I went on and studied physics instead. Not a lot easier, but basically I guess I've always liked sciences, and my dad's an architect, and he's been taking my sister and I to art museums since I was a toddler probably. And so I was very lucky because in Italy there's always been very specific training on sort of heritage science. It wasn't called heritage science, but we've got a long tradition of sort of mixed training in arts and sciences. And so I sort of found the natural way, or the easy way, to mix the two, the arts and the sciences together. And then of course Italy has great training in this sense, but no jobs, so I've had to move around quite a bit. And I think one of my key things is you really have, if it's jobs in museums, sometimes you really have to follow the jobs. You have to be willing to move about. There aren't that many, I mean, the UK is very lucky. There are several museums in this country that have scientists, and there are some in the States, but it's not that common a job. So it is something that you really have to have a really strong passion for, and just follow it wherever it might take you, I guess.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can imagine that would be the case. Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to read out a really lovely comment that I definitely agree with from Pieter saying, Nuha, if only every museum or heritage site had somebody doing what you do. And I would agree very much. Would anybody else, Hope or Elly, would you like to describe a little bit how you...
Yeah, so I didn't kind of come back from a museum background, like I didn't do anything related to that at university, but I'd always been very interested in museum and quite been like a big museum enthusiast. And I just kind of got into groups that were being held at the local museum, like art galleries that I was around at the time, and they were all kind of talking about opportunities that were coming along. and they ended up posting a jobs kind of search for a Wikipedia placement for Leeds museums and galleries. And I was like, huh, I've never heard of that before. And I was just kind of like, well, I know about Wikipedia, but I don't really know how to use it or edit it, but I'll give it a go. And luckily they were kind of looking for people with different experience, background, and who were just interested in museums and wanted to contribute in any way. So that's how I kind of got into it and applied on the whim. And luckily with Wikipedia, they have a lot of like online resources and training available. That's just kind of going back to the question in the chat about like things I would recommend. Wikipedia do kind of workshops and editathons where you can learn how to properly use and edit Wikipedia. So those are kind of things I was doing to kind of prepare for the job and interested in. And on my first day, I got to go to a really good editathon with the Trial Chasers, I think they're called, and it was an archaeology kind of based one. It was helping to raise awareness about female archaeologists on Wikipedia who hadn't had the opportunity to get their stories heard. And with that, it just came like more new skills, and you could ask people how to kind of interact and do things. So that's kind of how I got into mine. And then the job at the Science Museum group came up and I applied, and then I ended up getting it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Yeah, we found the link. It's the Trailblazers. It's the most wonderful project. It's really, really good. Wonderful thing. Elly, did you want to say anything as well?
Yes. So what was the path? Well, I'm not really I didn't start off as a kind of digital expert. I've never done anything which is related to IT. Everything. Obviously, I do everything related to IT. We all do now, but I've never officially studied that. And my PhD was in medieval art history, which is completely removed from web archiving, essentially. So I just got into it completely by accident, really. I applied for a role, or I think I was asked to apply for a role a few years ago for an organisation, and it turned out actually to be a role, a museum role, which was I thought it was a regular archivist role, but actually it turned out to be a digital archivist role. It wasn't advertised in that way. So anyway, but they offered me the role, and then suddenly I realised that actually I had to catalogue 20,000 records, essentially, or 20,000 documents. In a very short space of time, and so essentially I had to learn everything very fast, and I had to learn everything on the job. So I went from having almost no kind of digital knowledge to having probably being kind of medium to advanced within a couple of years or so. But I really think that certainly, in terms of kind of being a digital archivist and web archiving and that kind of thing, it really is something that you really have to learn it on the job. I mean, obviously you can do training on the side, but I really think that it needs to be learned on the job, because there's absolutely so much to learn, and it's kind of too much to take in all in one go, essentially. So the best route in, really, I think, is to either like Hope was saying, to kind of to get in the back door somehow, or perhaps even do some volunteering in that kind of role, essentially.
Thank you. 20,000 records. Yeah. Wow. So I just wondered, with all of these roles, because they are quite disparate and very not completely unique, but relatively unique, if you can actually be relatively unique, I wonder what it's like to have a job that very few other people have, and I wondered whether there's an element to building your support network? How do you build that? Do you look outside your organization? Do you find other people doing very similar things? What kind of what is it like to have a job that very few people have? Anyone like to start?
I think I'm maybe quite lucky because there's only a few Wikimedian in residence, but we've all managed to kind of like find each other and harbor together. And so we have like a group WhatsApp chat where we all kind of throw in questions together and we all kind of talk in that way. And I'm not sure how it kind of is with everyone else, but that's kind of one way we've managed to all kind of gain support together and help each other out that way. And we share resources with each other through there and kind of help each other with projects that we're working on. So I'd say just maybe reaching out to other people and finding out again, like as Elly mentioned, if you're kind of volunteering and working in different sectors or just working in any parts of the museum field, just talking to different people, you will manage to find someone who's related to what you're doing or weirdly doing the same job as you, but like completely based somewhere else. So, yeah.
Thank you. I love that. I like that expression, harbor together. That's really nice. That feels like what we're all doing in 2020 to me. So, Nuha, please.
Yeah, I think also I've been very lucky to find this job and make a big change in museum. And as my role really been very effective in museum. Different department in Oxford University, they looking to have a community ambassador in different role, in different department. And also in museum, they are going to run training for community ambassador. It's been really very effective, I've been very effective, and really we change a lot of system in museum. And we see there, we have a lot of audience who are really very liked our jobs and see this different and see this how we change a museum and how we break a lot of barriers there. Yeah.
Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, I very much have an academic job, besides working in a museum, not just because the museum is part of a university, but because it is a sort of an academic type job. And I think unlike lots of academic fields, heritage science is a very non-competitive and collaborative field because there are so few of us across the world. So we end up, there's very few sort of specialized conferences. You end up knowing the people and you end up keeping in touch and doing shared projects. So a few years ago, one of the projects I was doing on medieval manuscripts, we had an interesting, unusual discovery of a specific material, but we didn't have any other objects by the same artist that we could test our discoveries on. So I emailed my former colleagues in Washington and some other colleagues I met at the Getty and said, oh, I know you guys have objects by the same artist. Could you check it? Could you test it, please? And see if you find the same things. And then, a collaboration was born and we're writing a paper together about it. And that's just how it doesn't really matter where you are in the world in a way. You connect with the people you like to work with, and that becomes your support network. And I guess in a way, teamwork comes very naturally to us as well, despite the fact that we're academics in a humanities, department, which isn't the most teamwork friendly, simply because we couldn't do a job on our own. I'm a scientist, but I need to investigate objects for which I really need the expertise of the historians or art historians who care for them and know more about them. I can't, otherwise there's no point in me doing the analysis and say, well, this is gold. And they would be like, yes, so what? you know, we really need a dialogue between between me and them to figure out what this means. You know, does it tell us something about the history of this object? So that becomes your support network as well. Lots of people who don't do your job, but care for the same objects. So it's the objects that bring you together in a way. So, you know, the passion for reconstructing the history of these objects. I feel like we're all a bit, it's sort of a forensic science team in a way, and we're working on a really, really cold case. You know, we've got a crime scene that's 500 years old. Can we figure it out? And we've got different types of expertise sort of all working together.
Thank you. It's just so cool. So cool. I just before I moved to Elly, sorry, just was listening, wondering about whether your roles, because they're kind of like a sort of niche or something more specialized within the wider museum, and whether that gives you more freedom to follow your own priorities, to follow. Obviously, everybody works within an organization, but if that gives you more ability to pursue those interesting rabbit holes, or the things that you really have a passion about, or the so with Nuha developing these community groups and expanding further into the university, for example, or Paula, where you find something fascinating and you can just kind of follow that trail. Do you find that, or do you find that you still have to kind of fit within kind of a mixture?
I think it is very much a mixture. It depends on the organization and on the situation the organization is in. We're all overworked. You know, these organizations have strategies, so sometimes you do need to follow that strategic plan and sort of fit in with that. At the same time, I think if you can argue, because what we all do is exciting and new and different, if we do have the potential to be heard, perhaps. I mean, Cambridge is a very traditional place, obviously, and it's taken me about 9 years, but we've now finally managed to put together a Cambridge Heritage Science Hub, which brings together several departments, and we're finally talking across collections and across departments, and that's not a given. But because it's heritage and it's science and it's new, and it, you know, and there's a potential infrastructure funding coming from the government, then it could become a thing. You know, if you can make it interesting, if you can sell it to the right people, I guess you have to do a bit of selling. I think if you can get the media interested, that helps too.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I relate to that, working in UCL, another big university, that it just isn't always a given that all the departments instantly consider working as a team. But then when you do get that collaboration, it's something quite brilliant. Elly, did you want to say anything about support networks at all, or?
I think actually for kind of digital archiving and web archiving and these kind of, you know, the digital side of museum work, I actually feel that it is actually a lot easier these days to actually find your networks very fast. As I'm sure we all know from, you know, having been locked down for so long over the last 9 months, you know. It's everything happens online now, and it's been that obviously, you know, with kind of digital archiving, it's been like that really for a while now. So everything essentially is online and out there, and generally accessible to everybody. So there's a site which I'm sure many of you will know about, which is called GitHub, which is basically you can set up your own profile and kind of share programs and software and that kind of thing. And that's also you can kind of use it almost like a social media site, really, for kind of interacting with individuals who are also working in your sector. In terms of kind of web archiving in particular, there are various kind of informal research hubs. The British Library, for example, is leading the way. Obviously, the Imperial War Museum that I've just talked about, and also the National Archives. So it's very easy to tap into these networks. There are very often conferences which are run by these organisations, and also again far easier to attend now. And I've attended loads of international conferences over the last few months. I would never have attended them in the past because, you know, I would never have got funding to actually go overseas. But now they're all free, and they're all, you know, from your living room So the ones which I found particularly useful are conference which is called IPRES, which is about preservation of digital assets in the heritage sector, and also the Digital Preservation Coalition, which I think I mentioned before a few minutes ago, also runs, is an organisation which will run conferences, so training, which is sometimes free, particularly during COVID, and also has mountains of resources essentially to help you, help you discover what you need to do in a particular situation. So actually, I think I feel that it's easier really if you're working in digital, because there's just so much out there in terms of resources and in terms of kind of support as well.
Thank you very much. I just hastily scribbled the name of that IPRES conference, which I see Lucy shared the link in the chat. That sounds really good. I'm going to look that up. Thank you. Okay. Audrey shared a really great question, which is, these jobs sound fascinating. Do you think having such a niche job adds to job security? And is it worth pursuing a digital or community role, or is there a danger that these areas are a priority at the moment, could be replaced with something else in the future? So that's a big question.
Yeah. So are they roles that are only kind of short term? I think at the moment, we're having a digital revolution. We've been having a digital revolution for 20 years or so, but I think, with COVID, there's even more an explosion. As we know, throughout the museum sector over the last 9 months, it's absolutely boomed, and there are very, very many museums now who are going digital or going even more digital than they have been. So I can only really see that work in certainly the kind of digital archiving, the digital heritage field is just going to grow and grow. Essentially, I can't predict what it's going to be like in 30 years' time. Perhaps it might be slightly different, but I think certainly for the next decade or so, it's going to be an expanding area.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Paula. I think digital is here to stay. I think it's hard to say whether specific types of jobs, are necessarily, they might look completely different in 5 years' time. And I personally think it's all about transferable skills, digital skills and people skills and team working skills and leadership skills. It's all about that. And then you can adapt. I think it's about being flexible and really be able to adapt. I think that's going to be the key, to be honest. And the same for community involvement. I think we're going to have to do more. That's absolutely not a fad, but that doesn't mean that these jobs are permanent necessarily, that they're secure. But that's not true for lots of museum jobs. We've got core posts that are not funded long term. So I guess one doesn't go into museum roles for job security necessarily at any level.
Yeah, not anymore anyway.
Yeah, exactly, not anymore. Yeah, not even in research and heritage science, even for us. And also, I guess because it is niche, there's fewer jobs, obviously. So it might take some time, there's more competition potentially. But if we make a good enough job of it, then we can expand the field.
Thank you. And also Nicola's just posted in the chat, I think if community roles are kept as silos and seen as ticking the diversity box, then yes, as in yes, they can easily be replaced with something. However, if they are more accurately, seen as helping museums understand what inclusive practice really means by listening and collaborating, I definitely think these are expanding roles and supporting more inclusive spaces, which I would absolutely agree with. And it's really important that we all keep advocating for that at the moment, because it's something that we've noticed with fair museum jobs, that certain roles seem to be ring fenced even in a difficult climate, and it's often that kind of role that is targeted for cuts, which is wrong. It's wrong. It doesn't make sense. If you're a museum, you're for people. So that's wrong. So would anyone like to respond to the other question more, or shall I move on? Shall I move on? I will. So from the information that I've had about your roles in the run up to this event, and also in what you've described already, it seems to me that a unifying factor in much of your work is opening up museums for people, and for audiences, but opening up and sharing. How do you feel that your role helps to challenge barriers and inequalities? Nuha.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel my job is break a lot of barriers. I will bring example from my experience. When I start my job, like my status is refugee, and I here as newcomer, and when I start my role, like my team and people, they watch at me, they say, what's she going to add to our job? Why she is here, and that doesn't take a month to discover is my job is very valuable, and they really they was waiting when we've been in steering meeting or something. They will be waiting for my turn when I go to speak, because they really notice and they recognize is our job is very different. And throwing this one, they try to change also their work, and I feel like we really change a lot in museum, and I mean we break a lot of barriers there, and like they forget about my status, they forget I'm not white English, they forget everything, and they was looking what I'm bringing to share with them, my information, my culture, my my network also, because I also bring a lot of network to my role, also international work, international networking, I bring it to museum, and yeah, I feel like we really change and we really break a lot of barrier. And I can see it in different museums. They are going to do similar our job there. And in Oxford University, a lot of departments, they are starting speaking about doing similar to our job, which is good.
Yeah, it must be wonderful to have that impact and to see the effect, the kind of ripple effect of your work being noticed and seen and other people wanting to emulate it within the university, but hopefully further afield. It sounds really important. So that's excellent. Thank you. Would anybody else like to touch on that opening up and sharing aspect? Hope, sorry.
Yeah, so as part of my job, the Wikipedia project is specifically kind of focused on dealing with underrepresented groups who haven't had the opportunity to have their stories kind of accurately told or written about on Wikipedia. And luckily, the Science Museum group have quite a large collection ranging from different cultures and just ethnicities and minorities and groups that we can properly put onto Wikipedia with expert knowledge, which is quite helpful, which helps kind of bring down barriers or kind of stereotypes people may have of certain things. And one of the things that we are currently working on is working with people from those communities that we're writing pages about or making articles about, just to make sure that we're writing it with the most, I guess, sensitivity and accuracy, and getting accurate representation from those groups themselves. I think as a museum, sometimes when you're trying to be representative and kind of incorporating different cultures, sometimes it's easy just to write about a different culture, an object, or make an exhibition on it without, but I think it's more important that we're kind of doing community outreach projects where we get the actual voices from these people, from these different cultures and ethnicities, to help accurately write and portray these stories, and just being very conscious and more involved with them as well, not just kind of doing it as a way to kind of meet a quota or check a box, if that makes sense. So yeah,
It does, thank you. We just had a question in the chat from Nicola asking if you know whether the community partners get paid to support this activity at all.
Yes, so I think one good example would be quite a few years ago, the Science and Media Museum did I think it was like a photography project about how Bradford has changed over the years, ethnically and culturally. And I think the people who partook in that were compensated in some form. I'm not sure how much, because this was before I joined the project, but talking to some of the curators, they did say that they were accurately or well compensated for like their time in taking part into this. So I think we do mainly try and pay them as much as we can, or get some form of funding to cover the costs of their time and involvement in projects like this.
Thank you. I guess that wouldn't be the part of the project that you're involved in delivering, so as well. So yeah. Paula and Elly, did you want to respond to the opening up question a little bit, Elly?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think in terms of web archiving, in terms of kind of opening up, I mean, generally, obviously, digital archiving is all about. I mean, very often the very reason behind actually doing this at a very detailed level is that so that this archive material can eventually be accessible globally. So the long-term aim is that this material is accessible through a catalogue on the museum website, and therefore individuals all around the world can actually use this material for their own research and for education, learning, etc. So it does ultimately make it very accessible in these terms. And also archiving social media is very interesting. As part of the 1418 Now project, we archived one of the projects, which was the artist Jeremy Deller's We're Here Because We're Here project, which was soldiers dressing up in First World War uniform and all around the country and reenacting for 12 hours. And this particular project, the project was Jeremy Deller set it up as a project which was all about the people, and he was therefore very interested and very he was very determined that we were to capture the Twitter feed over the 12 hours, and this is what we've done. So it's not just the 1418 Now Twitter feed, it's actually the Twitter feed largely of ordinary, inverted commas, people and their reaction to it. For example, for actually seeing the soldiers in their various towns and cities. So actually it then becomes, this digital or web archive then actually becomes an archive of the everyday people. And, in 10 years time, 100 years time, all being well, people can actually, research the the kind of grassroots responses to the World War I commemoration programme.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was I remember that very vividly. I didn't get to see any of the soldiers, but it was a really extraordinary piece of art. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Paula, did you want to say anything as well? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think my job can open up the museum in a couple of different ways. From the point of view of an arts museum in a science-heavy university, I think we're really opening up to the scientific departments within the university. We're showcasing the fact that we're not just an arts museum. We do research and we do scientific research. And by showcasing that, for example, in exhibitions, I know I've had colleagues who are industrial chemists and said, I've never been to the Fitzwilliam, but I actually did go to see a show because I wanted, there was something for them. I think, you're adding a dimension, a different layer to objects that can feel very remote. If you're not interested in 15th century Italian art, maybe you don't feel that that's for you, but there's different dimensions. There's contemporary, modern, cutting edge research going on these objects. And so that, I think, bring a whole new type of audience potentially in. And also I'm trying to do quite a lot of work with schools engagement at the moment, and again we're engaging with teachers and paying for their time, or for the for supply teachers, so that they can come in and we together develop programs that are cross-curricular. And so again, to help the children develop visual literacy skills, but also different ways of looking at objects. How do you look at a painting? There's so many different lenses that you can use to look at it, and it covers all different areas of the curriculum. You can do English, you can do maths, you can do science, you do art and design. So we're really trying to open it up that way, because I also think in terms of the STEM skills shortage, I think it's a great way to entice people into STEM. It's a slightly different type of career, perhaps a slightly unexpected career in science, especially for many girls. Museum jobs, lots of women. It's a great place for STEMette to be. So we try to do a lot of work with STEM ambassadors. I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here. All the sort of very STEM focused initiatives to open things up, and say you could do that in an arts museum as well.
Thank you. I've never heard STEMette. Oh, that made me laugh. Incredibly, we only have 5 minutes, so I'm just checking. What should we do? I had a couple of other questions. We could answer what's the best thing you've been involved with, or perhaps what do you wish more people knew about your job? Do you have a preference over those two for the last 5 minutes? Oh, also what you're most proud of. Let's go with that one. Let's say, what are you most proud of in your work? What are you really proud of that you've done? I'll give you a few seconds. It sounds like you'll have 1,000 things to choose from, so.
I'm going to say that I'm really proud that I'm a woman in science and academia, but I'm also a wife and a mum, and you can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I can go next. Most thing I'm proud of, I'm a refugee and I'm just come to this country 4 years ago, and I start work with Oxford University. And honestly, I've been part of change, in Oxford University. It's make me really very proud. And especially it will be very good for our children to remember our culture here, because we're adding our voice, we're bringing our culture here to keep our children doesn't forget our culture and objects there,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Hope or Elly?
Oh, I don't know. I think, I'm still very quite new in my role as well. So I don't know what I'd be most proud of, I guess. Maybe the few articles that I've written that are published on Wikipedia that are being read by so many people. I think that's quite interesting, like something to be proud of. Lucy, who's the Fair Jobs Museum, she's kind of doing the tech stuff behind this. She reminded me that I helped with a wikathon that was based on women in Leeds quite last weekend, and I was teaching people how to use Wikipedia and edit Wikipedia online. So I guess, that's something cool. Never thought I'd be teaching people how to do that over Zoom, but here we are. So.
Oh, congrats. That sounds really amazing. Yeah, wonderful. And Elly?
Well, I suppose, it's the many things, but I suppose the main thing is actually, as I talked about before, going from actually not knowing anything about digital records or digital archiving to actually being relatively knowledgeable about it. So I think it's, if you're working in the role, you often, you don't realise that actually you're absorbing so much information that after a couple of years it just kind of comes naturally to you, and then you realise that you're actually speaking the language. And then I've been able to go off as a consultant and actually work with other organisations, and I'm supporting a number of organisations now in you know, in this kind of digital field as well. So, you know, it's you know, I never really thought that I had it in me, and I also thought that I wasn't actually very interested in you know, that kind of whole digital side, really, because you know, that's not really what my background's in. But actually, the more you know about something, the more interesting it becomes, generally anyway, not always, but you know, so I suppose I'm proud of the fact that I've kind of got this far, and I do find it fascinating, actually. So.
Thank you very much. I genuinely think we could have had an entire day on every single one of your roles rather than just one panel. So I think we've really only just scratched the very surface of the things that you do and the things that you bring to the sector. But it's really obvious to me that all of you made an enormous difference where you are. And it's really, yeah, it's been an absolute privilege to hear about what you've been doing. And I particularly like what Elly just said, that kind of moment when you realize you know how to do your job is really nice. So you realize, oh no, I do know this. I know it well enough to be able to help other people, and hope you're doing the same. And Nuha, you're guiding and shaping Oxford. Both of Paola and Nuha, shaping these big, old, august institutions and changing the way they work. And that's a huge achievement. So congratulations. It's unfortunately 8 o'clock, so we have to stop now, but I really appreciate all of you for being here this evening. All of our panelists particularly, but also everybody that stayed to listen and came along. So thank you very much. We'll call the meeting to a close, and I will be off for a whiskey because I've got a sore throat, and I'm hoping that will help, maybe. So I'll say thank you again, and we'll just leave the chat for a few seconds before Lucy closes it, so you can see all the thank yous and the lovely comments from everybody. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care.